Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Worldwide News. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Mia.
Our top story tonight involves a trade dispute between two economic powerhouses, China and Australia. On 24 June 2021, China requested consultations with Australia with respect to anti-dumping and countervailing measures imposed by Australia on imports from certain products from China, including wind towers, deep-drawn stainless steel sinks, and railway wheels. China claims that the anti-dumping measures appear to be inconsistent with articles from the Anti-Dumping Agreement, the GATT 1994, and the SCM Agreement.
Now, before we dive into this case, we need to understand that the global political background surrounding this case. China is a significant trading partner for Australia, and Australia and China have remained economically interconnected for many years, and any disruption in trade can have significant consequences on the relationship between the two countries.
In this case, the complainant is China, and there are multiple articles from the GATT 1994 relied upon in this complaint, as Australia appears to be inconsistent with the following provisions. Article V1 of the GATT 1994, because Australia did not calculate the costs on the basis of the records kept by the exporters or producers under the investigation, and because they did not properly determine the cost of production. As well as this, Article 2, as the amount of the anti-dumping duty imposed by Australia exceeds the margin of dumping as established in Article 1 of the GATT. Now let's take a look at the other side of this dispute. Australia is a respondent Worldwide Trade Organization member in this case, and the measure being complained of is the imposition of anti-dumping and countervailing duties on certain products from China.
China considers that the products of identifying countervailing duty investigation on certain products manufactured in China, as well as the countervailing duty determination, as the inconsistent with the obligation of China under the SCM agreement. They believe the Commission have applied unlawful standards and methodologies for this purpose in determining financial contribution and benefit from the aid provision of inputs for less than adequate remuneration in the processing. This complaint may be seen as justifiable, however, it depends on various factors, including the evidence presented by both parties and the interpretation of relevant WTO agreements. China has determined that some measures made by Australia as discriminatory, which may deem as justifiable under the WTO rules. In the cases of wind towers and stainless steel sinks, Australia failed to determine the amount for profits pertaining to production and sale of the product. As well as this, in the case of the railway wheels, Australia failed to determine the amount for profit incurred by the export and the amount of sales in the domestic market in the same general category of products.
Additionally, Australia also initiated the countervailing investigation without sufficient evidence of the existence of the alleged program and without proper review of the evidence provided in the application. China also claims that Australia is allegedly placed in a more advantageous position because they failed to determine the provision of goods to the recipient. By imposing the anti-dumping and countervailing duties, Australia appears to have failed to carry out and comply with its obligations under the agreements aforementioned. The measures at issue appear to impair benefits accruing to China directly and indirectly under those agreements. Therefore, due to these factors, it can be seen that it is justifiable that China raise the dispute due to the insufficient evidence in raising the anti-dumping and countervailing duties and lack of transparency regarding financial remuneration. Australia may justify these measures by arguing that they are necessary to counteract unfair trade practices, such as dumping and selling goods at lower prices in the export market than in the domestic market, and subsidies provided by the Chinese government to its domestic industries. Australia may also argue that these measures aim to protect its domestic industries from the adverse effects of unfair competition.
The bill was proposed by the country anti-dumping commissions. The Australian government says the exports have caused substantial damage to the country's native steel industry. China Minister of Commerce says steel production overcapacity is a global issue, and regional trade protection measures are not helpful. In solving the core problems, the ministry says such measures only maintain normal international north trend.
The dispute may be resolved through a bilateral negotiation which could take place, allowing both nations to engage in direct discussions aimed at finding a mutually acceptable solution. This would focus on modifying or removing certain measures China has raised in the dispute.
The World Trade Organization panel may then issue a report after examining the evidence and argument from both sides, which will determine whether Australia's measures comply with the World Trade Organization rules. Following this, either party can appeal the panel report and alternative procedures such as arbitration may be used.
However, if the panel finds Australia's measures inconsistent, Australia may need to modify its policies to comply with the World Trade Organization rules. Ideally, both nations should engage in transparent negotiations taking into account the economic impact on the industries and consumers. A fair resolution would involve balancing the interests of both parties while ensuring compliance with international trade agreements and rules.
As this dispute unfolds, it highlights the importance of diplomacy and adherence to estimate rules in resolving international trade conflicts. Thank you for joining us today, and we will continue to monitor this situation closely and provide updates.